going on, you rogues, rebels, and renegades? Welcome to episode 64 of the Rogue Country podcast. Today we have Pete Bernhard from The Devil Makes 3. But before that, let's get down to our lovely sponsor. Today we are brought to you by Pick Print Screen Printing. They're a Liverpool-based family-run hand screen printing company, and I love these guys. They do my t-shirts, they do the Rogue Country t-shirts, they do Josh Bettis' t-shirts. So if you need band merch, workwear, business uniforms, club or sports team wears, or apparel lines, please get in touch with them. They use eco-friendly inks. It's all done by hand, and they're just an incredible company to work with. I love them, and you should go support them. Yes, and we do have brand new Rogue Country merch in our Bandcamp. We have brand new t-shirts and we have brand new mugs. They have, of course, been printed by Pick Print Screen Printing, and we wouldn't use anyone else. They are available in our Bandcamp right now. Go grab them. Today we have the amazing Pete Bernhard from The Devil Makes 3, and he is going on tour with Clyde McGee from the Bridge City Sinners across all of March and April. So this episode we needed to release when we did, so you could know about these. He is going across Germany, the Netherlands, and Belgium, and you do not want to miss any of these dates. Head over to his website at petebernhard.com or at Pete Bernhard on any of his social medias to find out the dates. Head over to Clyde McGee to do the same, and you do not want to miss this tour. You also do not want to miss our next guest, who is going to be out a week today, with Mike from Mike and the Moon Pies. He is on tour in the UK from the 1st of April to the 5th of April. I'm opening for him in Manchester on the 4th of April. Ags is opening for him in Nottingham and Oxford on the 3rd and 5th. This tour is going to be incredible, and you do not want to miss that either. And speaking of unmissable tours, we've got Rogue friend and family Luke Hendrickson coming over, and I'm going on tour with him across the end of April, across England and Wales, and you do not want to definitely miss these shows. On April 22nd, we're at Dark Earth Records in Wallasey for an afternoon show to celebrate Record Store Day. Then April 22nd in the evening, we're at the Underground in Bradford with Chris Dover and the Hoodoo Operators. Then we're going to Salty Dog in Northwich on April 23rd. April 24th, we're in my hometown in Birkenhead at the Swinging Arm. April 25th, we're in Sheffield at the Dorothy Pax. April 26th, we're in Newark at the Flying Circus. April 28th, we're at the Whip and Kitten in Rossendale. Then we're heading down to hang out with Josh Bettis at the Brecon Tap in Brecon on April 29th. And then me, Luke, and Josh are playing the Dukes of Highgate in London on April 30th. This is going to be a tour for the ages, and you do not want to miss Luke Hendrickson's first UK tour. I hope you got to see John R. Miller and JP Harris, who were on tour across the UK earlier this month. Jackson Ward went to the Manchester date and wrote a lovely review for us, which is over on the Rogue social media pages, so please go check that out. But let's get down to brass tacks. Pete Bernhard from The Devil Makes 3, you know him, you know his band. His solo stuff is incredible. He's going on tour across Europe with Clyde McGee soon, and it was a genuinely lovely chat to talk to an artist I truly respect. So without further ado, this is episode 64 of the Rogue Country podcast with Mike West and Pete Bernhard. Yeah, like we were just talking about, with kind of, you've been doing music for over 20 years now, and we've just been talking about kind of mid-sized venues and like the lack of them in Liverpool and Manchester. When did you really become aware of like venue sizes mattering and like that progression increase? Because it sometimes seems from a outside perspective, it's someone will play like an open mic like Ed Sheeran and then they'll end up headlining Glastonbury, but for a lot of people they don't realize there's so many steps in between those things.
Yeah, I think we realized that pretty early on, because we definitely didn't go from the open mic to the headlining of a festival. So yeah, we took all the steps in between. And when we first started the group, we were playing mainly in San Francisco Bay Area. And so there it was like we played the same clubs for years on end. And there was very clear ways to get up. You know what I mean? You had the open mic, the small place, then the mid-sized venue, then slightly bigger than the biggest, so we really learned to go through those, and we played in California for quite a while before we toured outside.
Because that's an interesting thing about America, and what I've seen from people who kind of offer music advice on the internet. They're always saying, tour locally until you can kind of build, which is different for the UK because it's such a small island, but people travel less. So it's like you feel like you can do a tour in the UK or Europe easier and reach new people than it seems like America is. You have to kind of not be necessarily hometown heroes, but you do hammer like your state, which like California is massive, and states in America are huge. And you do have that opportunity to just beat the shit out of the venues in your area before you can, build and expand.
Yeah, not only, I mean, you sort of have to.
Mm.
Because like you said, it's so big. And that's one of the things I love about touring in Europe is that like for us, it seems like all the drives are short, it's like everything's close together. I have friends who do tours on trains, they can get from one place to the other, and then they might have to fly to a gig or something. And that's basically impossible here. I really encourage like, especially new artists to, really work their local scene as much as humanly possible. And there's no point in going across the United States because like you said, it's so big. I mean, you just get lost in the shuffle.
Yeah. And with kind of your scene being that Americana murder folk style, was that scene when you started out in 2002, or did you see it kind of take, bloom? Because a lot of artists in, say, the last 5 or so years, with folks like Amigo the Devil, Bridge City Sinners, who I know was there a scene back then in 2002, or have you seen it grow exponentially?
Oh, no, I've definitely seen it grow. It's not that it didn't exist back then, but it was very, very small. And a lot of times, too, because we were a band without a drummer, we would usually get asked to play between bands. It was like kind of considered not that serious a thing. There was very much a bluegrass scene, like a traditional music scene, but not exactly the same as what we were doing. And we watched it grow. And honestly, we were lucky to be a band at that time when it did grow so much. We really, that was great for our group because when we started out, it was pretty hard to get a gig. And then over time, it got bigger and bigger and bigger, and that was just our good luck, honestly.
No, that's awesome because it's a weird thing when a band doesn't have a drummer. It does seem like you're at a bit of a disadvantage because people do not necessarily think you can either hold a crowd's attention or make that much noise. Because as a solo artist myself, I normally tour with either me or me and a fiddle player, and we've got a drummer coming. But it is one of those things where if I don't have a drummer, I've been told, well, you aren't a real band, so we won't put you on. And it's a weird thing, and it's interesting to see, you guys came up against that as well.
Yeah, it was constant. And also when we first started playing, we would play with a lot of kind of bands outside of our genre. We played with a lot of punk bands and stuff like that. And usually it was like, you don't have a drummer, you're not a band. And it's the same thing when I play solo as well. It's, similar treatment to what you're getting, it's like a drummer makes a band a real band. And so we did, struggle with that at first. And I think as time went by, it was kind of the genre, the style of music grew. And then people were more accepting. It was like, okay, a guy with a guitar and a fiddle player, that's a band. A guy with a guitar player and a banjo player and a bassist, that's a band too, It kind of opened up the idea of what was possible, which was great. At the beginning, it was frustrating, but it got better.
Yeah. And did you find, I've always found that the punk and metal scenes were a lot more embracing like the country, Americana, bluegrass scenes of your type of music. Do you find that was kind of like the early takers on was the punk and metal kids as opposed to the traditional like minded folks?
Yeah, they would give us shows, That's really it. It was sort of that was our friend group, and where we really started playing, and we would help our friends get shows when we could and stuff like that. And they were really open-minded. I mean, they were willing to do it. And also at that time, there would be a lot of bands on a bill. So, they were always willing to add something, and they didn't really care if the genre was the same. One of my early gigs when we played in Eugene, Oregon was actually a friend of ours we got in touch with who books metal. And we called him and he said, no, I don't want to do the show, but what kind of music do you play? And we told him we played kind of like, folk music, traditional music. And he agreed to do it. He was just like, I don't want to book any more metal, but he was willing to book us. So I think you're totally right. I mean, there was a lot of open-minded people.
No, awesome. And going way back to the beginning, I read that you got your first guitar at 12 years old and your dad was the one who gave you lessons initially. Do you remember kind of what you grew up listening to and what you started playing, or what he started showing you back in like when you first started?
Oh yeah, definitely. My dad was a big influence, and also my brother as well
Mm,
was a big influence on my music and my musical taste. And my dad was really into Lightning Hopkins was his
mm,
like favorite blues guy. So that was some of the first blues music that I ever heard. I absolutely love that. But my dad also loved Bob Dylan, uh, the Police, the Talking Heads. He loved Bob Marley, some reggae. He had like very
mm,
extensive reggae like record collection. He had like a lot of interesting taste. And my brother then introduced me to more kind of like he knew that I was interested in blues music, and he bought me um, album collection called the Willie Dixon Chess Box, which
mm,
was all of the blues records from Chess Records. And he also bought me a collection of all of Robert Johnson's like complete
mm.
recordings. And that was like, I was probably about 13, 12 or 13. And that was really life changing. So between my father and my brother, I got a really great musical education, and they both were guitarists and
Mm.
singers. My uncle was also a guitarist and a singer. My aunt was a guitarist and a singer. So I had a lot of great influences around me growing up.
No, that's awesome. I think it's like it's really important because I remember I used to watch like old videos of Kiss and stuff and see Ace Frehley playing and be like, oh my God, that's fucking amazing. And I always wanted to pick up a guitar, but it wasn't until my sister kind of brought my brother-in-law home when they first started dating. He was a guitarist, and to see it accessible is more of a mind-blowing thing than seeing Eddie Van Halen shred eruption. To see someone play it in real life in front of you who you know normally, I always think it's such an underrated thing to have in the house or in the family, and that's really what I see influences a lot of people more than the typical guitar heroes that you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, for me, my aunt and my brother and my father, they're sort of like your first,
Mm,
heroes in your family, and they all played. So it was obvious that I wanted to do the same thing from a pretty young age. And yeah, I think it really helps. I think it's more difficult. I mean, even my aunt was kind of like a regional artist growing
mm,
up, and she did a lot of concerts. We would go watch her play, and yeah, it was like, yeah, it's possible.
yeah.
It's possible. She's doing it. I can do it. My younger sister used to go on stage and sing with my aunt, when she was like 9. And so yeah, it makes it real.
Mm. No, that's awesome. And going back to like Robert Johnson and stuff, like I'm a huge Robert Johnson fan. What was it about you that first struck it when you first started listening? Because I remember, I think it was a Metal Hammer article where they were talking about influences of like devil music pre-metal, and they had
Hmm.
like an article on Robert Johnson, and I went back and listened to it and was just blown away by it. But what do you remember is like the first thing that like struck you from his playing and his sound?
I mean, well, first of all, him playing solo, there's this really cool aspect of kind of call and response
Mm,
between the singing and the guitar, which is something I'm still working on doing, finger picking today. And I feel like when I first heard that, I thought, wow, so much more is possible. But then also, there's the songs themselves are pretty dark.
mm,
And I was drawn to that as well. And there is a connection, kind of between that and rock and roll, of course, and then metal and punk music as well. And I think there was something about that I just found really alluring. And um, I started pretty early on to try and learn to finger pick too.
mm,
So those were my first, influences. And I think I'm still chasing that today, you
mm.
know.
Yeah. And no, totally. It's one of those things where you always try and capture that feeling of when you first like discovered. Like I remember first listening to Blind Willie Johnson, and I had him on my headphones, and I stopped what I was doing to be like,
Mhm.
holy fuck. And even now when I listen to another artist in the back of my head, I feel like, is this gonna hit me like that again? And it's such a
Hmm.
cool feeling to get and to connect with an artist like that.
Yeah, and I had that 100% with the Willie Dixon stuff as well, which is a bunch of different artists, who are singing his songs. That was, it was Muddy Waters and
Mm,
Little Walter and all these people too. And I just had this, I don't know, I think it was just like I still listen to that music now, and I still love it like I did then.
mm.
which is, I am the type of person who does get hooked on, certain sounds and stuff like that, but I feel like it is timeless, at
Yeah.
least for me.
Yeah. I don't know if it's because of the age of it. Like if like I grew up like I'm a huge Linkin Park fan, but I
Hmm.
was there kind of at the beginning of it and there at the end of it. While this was began and ended before me, so it seems like it's just in this own universe of something that is just timeless.
Yeah, I don't know why either. I always had a real fascination with older music.
Mm,
Um, I'm not sure exactly why. It could be because of my dad's, record collection, like early introduction to blues music and older rock music that I just absolutely loved. But I mean, even I remember in high school, I loved listening to that stuff, and that was at a time when, like middle school, high school, everybody was really into metal. That
mm,
was what was popular at that time where I lived. And then I was into this very old, blues music stuff. I like metal as well, but not as much,
mm.
And I'm not really sure why that happened, but it's still that way today.
Mm. And did that kind of inform when you were doing the Redemption and Ruin album? Because I'm a huge Chris Christopherson fan, and obviously you did Chase the Feeling. I was like, this is the fucking best thing ever. But did that kind of inform the decision making process when you picked the songs? Because you picked some of like the artist obscure songs, like with Robert Johnson. It wasn't kind of like Crossroads. It wasn't like the obvious choices with Hank Williams. It was Angel of Death, and as opposed to one of his bigger hits. Was that kind of informed when you were picking those songs out?
Yeah, it definitely was, 100%. And I mean, also with that album too, it was kind of like the concept of having, a side for Redemption and a side for Ruin. So
Mm.
that kind of informed the choices of the tunes. But honestly, that was just hero worship, really. It's like great to be able to play these songs and pay tribute to these artists that you love. Um, yeah, I mean, I could make five more albums like that and then not be done,
Yeah. Yeah.
with all the people that I love. But yeah, we definitely chose more obscure songs and songs that fit with the concept of two different sides of the album.
Mm. Were there
Yeah.
any songs that you wanted to go on or didn't just make it that you were hoping to or you were thinking of recording before then? Or did you have those kind of songs like hammered down that this was going to be the record?
We pretty much had those hammered down. Yeah. Yeah, we spent a lot of time choosing them. But I mean, honestly, though, yeah, I mean, if we started thinking about it again, there's a ton more. There's a ton more. We actually recorded one on that session that I have lost track of that was by a guy named Riley Puckett, and it was called Ragged But Right. And we recorded it for that session and didn't make it onto the record. But there was a ton of songs we listened to. I mean, yeah, if we were to go back through it, we could make probably four more albums like that. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. And going on to your Harmony Ascension Division record, the solo record
Hmm.
from 2020, that was recorded all in like one session, or was that written in one session?
It wasn't written in one session, but it definitely was recorded in one.
Mm,
Yeah. And mostly because of the situation with COVID, it was like, that was the way I had to do it.
yeah.
There was like, you could go in the studio and sort of get it done in a short period of time. But it was written over a long period of time. I have a tendency to like, let songs kind of kick around for a
Mm.
while. It's a big complaint with, people who want a lot of material. I tend to like take my time with the song and it might be around for years before I feel like it's finished. And some of the songs I wrote while we were recording, some of them I'd had for
Mm.
quite a while. And for me, it just depends, and some songs I feel like they just need more time.
Mm. Is that kind of you have the verses written out and then you go back and redraft, or is it you have like two-thirds of a song and it's the last third of a song that you're kind of mulling over?
Sometimes the whole song's finished, which is great. Other times, all I have is like a chorus and a line. You know what I mean? I feel like it's a good song, but I need time to mess around with it. And that was one nice thing about that is that I had a lot of time
Mm.
to kind of write in the studio, which is something that can be difficult, when you're on kind of a time crunch.
Mm.
You feel like you got to get the record out. It's like, well, if a song isn't working, you have a tendency to be like, well, maybe we save this for next time. Maybe this isn't one that's ready. Maybe I need to put it back in the shop. But having more time, I could kind of mess around with it. which was great. It's kind of like the experience of um, back when they had like huge budgets for records and you could just spend like 6 months in the studio or whatever. I didn't do that, but I think, for me, I had more time and space, and that was really great.
And do you have your own studio, or is it a studio local to you that you use regularly to kind of use that time?
I do have my own studio, but honestly, I don't really have that gift. I have a lot of friends who can just like lock themselves in a room and make an amazing album, but I really need somebody to bounce things off of, even if it's just an engineer. And also, I really appreciate somebody who has, that talent to be able to make everything sound the way that it should and run things. And yeah, so for me, no, I actually used a local studio for that. A friend of mine who lives pretty nearby, it was up in the mountains, and it was a really nice, peaceful studio. And that's what I usually do. I make demos at home. I feel like that's about where I'm at.
Yeah. Yeah, nothing that takes too many layers or clicks or stop starts.
Nah, for me, it like takes me out of the experience of writing. I'll start doing something, and then I'll start messing around with trying to get it to sound a certain way, or maybe getting the tracks to line up, or have a problem with latency or something like that. And the next thing I know, I'm not doing what I came there to do, so I've learned the hard way.
And with that album, it's a lot of songs that are kind of like narrative based and personal and drawn from your past. Was that with your solo stuff? Is that a conscious choice as opposed to kind of the Devil Makes Three stuff? This is your voice is as honest as you can be, as opposed to with a trio where you kind of expected to have a persona or some sort of image to push?
Yeah, exactly. That is a big part of it, and a lot of the songs too that I don't end up using for the band, I'll play on my own. And in the band too, I do a lot of character writing, which is always really fun. It's like I take a story that I want to tell. It isn't necessarily something that happened to me.
Yeah.
But it's just it's like a fun challenge and an interesting thing to try and write about, take somebody's life or something that happened in their life, a specific situation. And I do that a lot for the band. And yeah, I do that less for when I'm playing by myself. I think it has a more personal aspect to it. Because, as you know, when you play by yourself, it's a different experience.
Yeah.
When you've got a whole band up there, it's just a different feel, So yeah, definitely when I approach writing solo songs, it comes from a more personal place.
And is it, because obviously with kind of it still is narrative songs, so do you kind of look at your past experiences and try and plot them in a narrative, like in a story way, as you do with Devil Makes Three, or do you just kind of, these are the kind of emotions and intent I want to express and write from that point?
I think a lot of times what I'm doing is kind of thinking about how I can process these things that happened. You know what I mean? So like, say I have a situation or somebody, like, especially on the last record, I might write a song about a friend who, passed away or something like that. I think it's just me trying to wrap my head around it. You know what I mean? It's like, if I can write the song and it kind of can deepen my understanding of what happened, or just make me feel better about it. I mean, that's a huge part of music in general for me. Is and it's also a huge part of the music that I listen to. You can sometimes, listen to a song that is just like we were talking about earlier, like some of the blues stuff, like Robert Johnson, like the song itself is really dark and, can be pretty depressing, but somehow listening to it makes you feel better.
Yeah.
And I mean, for me, that's the trick. And that's kind of what I'm trying to accomplish. And, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I don't necessarily approach it with a story in mind. I just kind of let it take shape. I mean, I feel like songwriting for me at its best is when I don't actually feel like I'm totally in control.
Yeah.
Like I have an idea, I kind of can let it take shape. And I feel like if I try too hard, sometimes I end up ruining it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
when it's
no,
good,
totally.
When it's good, I feel like I don't have to try that hard. sometimes that's not true. I've had songs that I've banged around for years and they got great, and a lot of too with help with bandmates or
Mm.
friends and stuff like that. But for the most part, I find that I don't plan too much. I try and just let it happen.
Mm. I think that helps with what you're talking about when you're trying to process something in your life as well. I think that really helps because songwriting is kind of stream of consciousness. So
Hmm.
I assume when you're writing these things, you're trying to remove as much of a filter as you can to try and catch everything. But by removing that filter, you're removing your own biases to that situation. So when you actually come to it again, you're like, oh, fuck, this is the process to it. This is why I'm actually angry at this person.
Hmm.
This is why I'm really sad that they're gone. It takes like a whole new level to it that you've managed to kind of remove yourself, or as opposed to if you sat there and thought about that situation, you
Hmm.
wouldn't have reached the same destination.
Yeah, it's almost like you can look at it like it was happening to somebody else. And
Mm,
in a sense, I think that is kind of a little bit of character writing, even though it is you and your personal experience.
mm,
You know what I mean? It is kind of a little bit of character writing because you are approaching it like you're outside of it, like
mm,
it didn't happen to you, like it happened to somebody else. And I think there's something you can create too, where somebody else has had a similar experience and they feel that as well. That's really the best thing about music for me,
mm, yeah.
is that connection that you can sometimes make.
Mm. And is there anything you can kind of think of in a particular song that when you've kind of taken it to a friend or a bandmate and they've pointed something out or given some feedback to a song that's when it's clicked?
Well, actually, I have a weird experience with songs sometimes where I write a song and I think it's about a certain subject. And then as time passes, it
Mm,
becomes like I sort of realize maybe it
mm,
was about something else. You know what I mean? And I've had that experience with, people asking me, oh, well, is this song about that? And then, sort of as I think about it, I'm like, maybe it is. You know what I mean? Like the meaning of the song can
yeah.
change over time. And I've definitely had that happen where I've written a song and then, years later, I'm like, wow, I think that song may have been more about that than it was what I intentionally thought I was writing about,
Mm,
which is great. I mean, I think that's something that could keep a song alive,
yeah.
you know?
Mm. No, that's awesome. Um, Kind of going back to when I was doing some research for this, it was, talking about playing guitar at 12, doing open mics at 15, and one of the lines that caught my eye was banging the stage fright out of your voice and fingers early on. Was stage fright something you kind of dealt with when you first started out when you were like 15 or so?
Yeah, I've always been really happy that I started so young, and I'm a huge fan of open mics.
Mm,
I think it's just such a good place to start. It's like it's so true.
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if you play an open mic and people like it, they really like it. And if they don't, they really don't. It's like it's very honest in there. Most
Mm,
people, who come are waiting to play.
yeah.
You know what I mean? So if they like it, and then it's their friends and family. So they have no reason to like you. So if they do, they really do, and I always really liked that a lot. But yeah, when I was young, I definitely had serious stage fright.
Mm,
And I really hated public speaking. I didn't like to be on stage. And I think that the great thing about starting so young is I just got all of that out of the way. And
mm,
I think about that a lot because especially with, friends or people I've known who kind of want to start a music career later in life, I think, oh man, that's just must be so difficult because I was a teenager,
mm,
so I was very nervous, but that was normal. I mean, who isn't nervous at,
yeah.
15 years old or 16 years old? So I got to get up there and, make a fool of myself. And I found like it was such a good environment to do that in.
Mm,
I was also met other people who were doing the same thing, met people who I looked up to. They were way better than I was. They had done shows in other
mm,
towns, it was like a great way to get inspired. And yeah, I feel like that's the best way to do it.
mm.
I think it's the best way to start out, and I'm just glad that I didn't do it when I was like 30, like
Yeah. No, it is one of those things. I remember having stage fright when I was a kid, and it took me like I did that. You see it in films and stuff where someone gets up to like me and my friends and put a band together, and I was gonna sing, and then I went to, and nothing came out,
yeah.
and then it's like everyone's looking, and everyone starts look.
Hmm.
That ruined me for like another 5 or 6 years, and it took
Hmm.
me ages to try and get back onto that thing. But it is like the earlier you kind of can start and get it out of your system. Hopefully it won't creep back up again, or, you won't start later and have to deal with that.
Yeah, the great thing about sort of starting out, in playing in bars and open mics and stuff like that is you're not the only one that's going to happen to.
Yeah.
Like somebody else is going to choke. You know what I mean? It's like that's what it's made for. And so that's great too. Like if I got up there and played and I did a really bad job, my nerves just got the better of me. It's like, well, there's somebody coming that's going to do the same thing. So it's like you don't have to feel like, oh my God, I blew it for everybody. There's such low pressure. And yeah, I really appreciate that. But I gotta say though, I mean, even that said, there's a big difference, and now that I'm going and doing shows by myself.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a completely different thing. And having played with a band for so long, I realized like getting on stage by myself, I was like, wow, this is almost like I'm starting over again. Which was two things, both really, really frightening, but also really fun.
Yeah.
Because I was also just remembering those times of like, wow, yeah, this is what it's like to get on stage by yourself. And yeah, it's cool.
And I saw you recently did your first solo tour of Canada, and this is your first solo tour of Europe coming up. Is the solo project something you've kind of only recently started touring on your own?
Pretty much, yeah. And a big part of that is that, the Devil Makes Three is spread out.
Yeah.
We have members in Nashville, Texas, Vermont, Rhode Island. So it's kind of a way for me to just be able to continue to play. And I did go on one solo tour of the West Coast a long time ago. I don't know, like 2016 or something like that. But these are the first tours that I've ever done solo, and especially outside the United States. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. And going back to kind of, that nervousness, when you did that tour of the West Coast and stuff, was it kind of a nervousness of, are people even going to show up? Are people just wanting like Devil Makes Three? Like, was there a lot of kind of apprehension before you did that? And obviously, have you seen that kind of been dissuaded by the reactions when people have been out?
Yeah, I mean, it's always a concern.
Yeah.
For sure. And I mean, I think when you go out, it's two things, maybe three things, but it's like, is anybody going to come? First off, I mean, that's a thing for any performer, any band. That's always the biggest question. And then if they come, are they going to just want to hear the band? And then, after that, if they hear your music, are they going to like it? You know what I mean? It's like, it's a lot of questions come up for sure. And I definitely had that when I played in California, because for the band, I mean, for instance, in Canada, we're not that well known. In California, that was like hometown crowd. So that was definitely a concern before I did it. And it always is, it always is. It's like when you're in a group, people expect a group.
Yeah.
And when you play by yourself, it's different, and it's like either people are going to be accepting or they're not. No way to know.
No, it's always interesting. And the showing up thing, I always remember there's a Henry Rollins story when he's talking about opening for an arena band, and he kind of got off stage and the headliner was like, are people actually out there? And he was like, of fucking course there is. And it turns out it was Ozzy Osbourne that was asking that question. And it always makes me laugh that even at like that level, it's still in the back of your head that that's a thing that can happen. And it's a really interesting kind of perspective of a musician that no matter what kind of stage you're at in life, that's always the worry.
Yeah, I don't think it ever goes away. And I think that's like being an artist in general of any kind. It's kind of like the curse. I mean, the great thing about it is that you get hopefully, if you can, you get the freedom to play music or do art and have that be your life and your lifestyle, which is great. The hard part is that it can end at any moment. So you always sort of have that insecurity of like, am I going to go out there and nobody's going to be there? And I think, I mean, Ozzy Osbourne, I mean, God, they reached a level that you should never feel that way. But I think at that point, it's so ingrained.
Yeah.
So many years of wondering, are people going to show up? Are they going to like the record? Is it going to work out? You know what I mean? So it's like it's just a curse. That's just what it is, I think, to do any sort of art. Um, God, I can't believe that's still happening to somebody that big, but I
Yeah,
guess it's possible, you know?
yeah. No, totally. So obviously you've got the European tour coming up, which is your first solo one, and I know for a fact you're not going to have to worry about people showing up. I know in my little corner of the world, people have been buzzing about this tour, and it's with Clyde McGee as well from Bridge City Sinners. Where did you meet Clyde? Was it through the Sinners first?
Actually, no. That came through the people who were booking the tour in Europe.
Oh,
And
really?
they actually came up with the idea, like, hey, you guys both want to tour here. Why don't you do the tour together?
Mm,
And I was like, wow, that sounds like a great idea. And honestly, for me, after being in a band for so many years, touring by yourself can be a little lonely.
mm.
So I was like, that's a great combination. And actually, when we get back from the tour, I think I'm going to go and do some dates with him in Colorado as well.
Oh, cool.
So we're going to kind of continue it a bit more after it's over. Um, yeah, that was the connection.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. And with this European, so obviously you've toured Europe before with the Devil Makes Three and everything. How have you found the difference between kind of like the American crowds, the UK crowds, and the European crowds?
Hmm. Yeah, well, God, there's a lot of differences for sure. I think what I've found mostly is that the crowds in Europe, or at least for the band, were a little bit less rowdy,
Hmm.
a little bit less wild than the crowds in the United States, but also way more attentive.
Mm.
So I'm really excited about that in terms of playing solo. That's really great. Sometimes it can be hard, depending on the environment, to win over
Yeah.
some people playing as a solo artist. It can be really difficult. So yeah, that was one of the differences, and also just as like a musician touring in Europe, people have a tendency to be. There's a lot more hospitality.
Yeah.
It's really nice. In the United States, it's not really expected that a group get will get a place to stay,
Yeah.
or necessarily food or any sort of welcome.
Yeah.
You get there, you're welcome to the venue or whatever, and you play the gig. Everything else is on your own. And one thing I found in Europe is that, yeah, there's just so much more hospitality in terms of people will, like, welcome you into their home. And,
Mm.
I even had people be like, you can stay in my apartment. I'm going to go and stay at a friend's, which is, I mean, I hate to say it about my own country, but it's kind of unheard of here.
Yeah.
Like nobody will do that. Yeah, and the audiences in Europe have been really like receptive, and people are
Mm.
having a great time, but they also really want to listen.
Mm.
Um, the only negative thing that we've experienced a little bit of is that we don't do great in Southern Europe.
Mm.
And I think partially, like you said, a lot of the songs are really lyric based. And I don't know if the feeling of the song transfers as much if you can understand the
Yeah.
lyrics. And also, I have a tendency to write really as many lyrics as I can pack into a song. It's like a
Mm.
small novel.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I've had a great time there. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah. No, that's like France and Spain, really, because I've toured and I've done Netherlands, Germany, and Belgium, and they seem to be kind of the best, like, kind of
Yeah.
run of shows. But it is an interesting thing how, like, because I know there's a Spanish band called Moonshine Wagon, but they kind of come up, or they come to the UK, and it's just fucking amazing.
Hmm.
But then they do sing in Spanish as well. It's a really interesting kind of divide from that. But it's interesting how even across the water from Europe to UK seems a lot more American in that you don't get food, you don't get accommodation, you'll get a
Hmm.
handshake, hopefully. But,
Hmm.
Europe kind of is this promised land for touring. It's a really interesting culture that they've built, and it's amazing, and it's envious to be on like the other side of it and see that thing.
Hmm. Yeah, it's great. I mean, the first time that we did it, I was blown away.
Mm.
Because I mean, that's something that you might experience at sort of like a smaller level DIY punk
Yeah.
shows in the United States. That definitely happens. I mean, somebody who who's like a friend will book the whole tour. They'll let you stay with them. They'll set up other places for you to stay. But outside of that, it
Yeah.
doesn't exist. It doesn't exist here. And yeah, like you said, I mean, people in the UK have been really friendly to us, but it's not expected that you have that same level of
Yeah.
hospitality. And yeah, it's great. I mean, we were just blown away the first time we toured there. We were
Yeah.
like, wow, it could be like this. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was really fun.
Do you remember what year it was you kind of first came over to Europe?
Wow. Well, actually, that's a long story. The first time we ever came was right when we started the band.
Mm.
And we did a pretty extensive, two pretty extensive tours in France. We had a friend who we met in San Francisco who was a promoter, and she wanted to bring us over there and do a tour. And we went over in the summer, we did like a month-long tour, and then we came back the next year and did the same
Mm.
thing. And it was mostly, we came to southern France. We kind of based out of southern France. And like I said, all the drives are so short for us.
Yeah.
So they would say like, oh, we have a really long day today. And it would be like 3 hours. And I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. So, that was our like introduction.
Yeah.
And after that, I mean, I had a great time on that tour. We had a lot of fun. We didn't make any money, sadly, so we didn't end up going back a third time, but we just had a blast. And I
Mm.
knew that after that, I knew we were definitely going to try and come back.
Mm. And
Yeah.
with the solo tour this year, did you reach out because it's booked through mutual friends, Franziska and Mary Lee? Did
Hmm.
you reach out to them first, or did they reach out to you about touring? Or
They actually reached out to me.
yeah,
Yeah, which was great. Yeah. And I said, I mean, I said basically the same thing you were saying earlier, is that I thought, Germany, Belgium, and the Netherlands are really like the best places to
mm.
play outside of the UK,
Mm.
honestly. If I could extend this tour, I would love to do that. And actually, when we announced the tour, a bunch of people in England and Scotland especially were like, hey, what's going on? Why aren't you coming here? And I was like, I'd love to, but we didn't really get on it this time around.
Mm.
But yeah, I suggested that would be the best spot. And I do think that for the style of music, it
Yeah.
is kind of the right spot to do it. And they were like, we have lots of contacts there and it wouldn't be a problem, which
Mm.
is awesome. So I'm hoping that the tour will go well and I'll definitely be back.
Mm. No, I truly and genuinely believe it's going to be a success. I've seen the venues that you're playing, and it's there's such an amazing scene over there that you can't help but be envious of. It's so good out there.
I know. I agree. I actually had such an awesome experience, like playing festivals in Belgium,
Mm.
especially with the band, and like a lot of the groups that they book. I'm like, man, this is like it's like I would have done it myself.
Mm.
Like if I was like, what would be a great festival to get like bands from the States to come over to Belgium, in a certain style.
Yeah.
It's like exact. It was amazing. I mean, they do a great job over there, and so.
Mm.
Yeah, I'm stoked.
Yeah, and it's hard because I think I was one of the people who messaged to be like, "Is there any UK?" I think I messaged Fran to be like, "Is there any UK dates coming up?" But it's hard to kind of explain the difference in touring because it's only one kind of ferry trip, but the costs go up in a
Yeah.
way that people don't really expect, or there's
Hmm.
just these weird little add-ons and things that it just makes it harder, and it's such a weird thing to think that it's one ferry ride, but it just gets much more difficult.
Yeah, it is. It's logistically a lot
Yeah,
harder. I mean, there's a lot of things you have to consider for sure. I know it's a drag because it does seem like, oh, you're so close,
yeah,
why not just go right over the water? And honestly, it is short. I mean, you're right, it's easy. But yeah, there's a lot of other things that go into it. I think people don't realize, yeah, there's you got to get merch there, you got to
yeah,
get your car there, you got to travel there. Yeah, so there's a lot of things to consider, but I'm hoping that what I could do next time, I mean, I'll be there with the band, which is
yeah.
great. And we have 4 dates. And, apologies to the places we didn't make it, but we'll make it next time. But I'm
Mm,
hoping that when I can come back solo, that I'll just play in England, Ireland,
mm,
Scotland. And that would be a great trip and well worth it.
yeah,
I think if I could just focus on that,
yeah.
no problem.
Yeah, that's the thing that kind of, you can kind of do one or the other, but to do both in one go. I know Bridge City Sinners did it in August last year, but
Hmm.
that was, I think, like 30 or 40 dates. It was a fucking long time they were out for. And it is one of those things. It was like, if you don't have that time or that concentration to do those things, it is better to, do Europe one go, the UK the next go.
Yeah, I think so. And that's kind of the thing about it, is that you sort of need to do 30 dates if you're going to do both, because otherwise it's just not enough. And so, yeah, I mean, we've had the same experience, and that's why, we're coming back with The Devil Makes Three. We only have 4 dates because, we kind of need to keep it short this time. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it's like 30 dates. It's a long tour, but I mean, there's a lot of ground to cover. And I'm hopeful next time come back solo and just do the UK.
No, totally. I don't feel like you've kind of made it as an artist unless there are people in the comments complaining that you aren't playing somewhere.
That's true. That's a really good point. So you say you're playing somewhere and nobody asks for you to play anywhere else. You're right. That's actually a really good point.
Yeah, because it's like you'll announce like a London date and someone will be like, well, why not Cambridge? And it's like, well, Cambridge is like an hour away. Just, make the trip down.
Oh yeah, totally. I know. That's exactly how I feel. With the case of Ireland and Scotland, though, I mean, that's legit. We've got to make a special trip there.
Yeah. Well, obviously, you've got the UK tour from, I think, it's the 25th of May to the 11th of June. The Devil Makes Three, that's including some Europe dates as well. With, obviously, you were saying there's 4 UK dates. Is it, a point of kind of hitting Scotland and Ireland and England? I don't know if there was a Welsh date, but it is kind of like you do want to cover, even in, 4 dates, you want to cover as much of the UK as possible.
Well, actually, this time around, we're only going to be playing in England. Yes, that is the goal, 100%. But we just don't have enough time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would really like to do that. I mean, that is the ultimate goal. And the last time we went, we just went to Scotland. We sort of have to break it up. But yeah, ultimately, that would be the thing to do, is to do them, basically split up the dates to as many different countries as we possibly can.
And is this the last tour since, I know you came over in 2018 and Beans on Toast, who's been on the podcast, opened. Was that the last time you were in the UK as The Devil Makes Three?
It is. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it was a really, really fun tour. But obviously then things got pretty complicated for international travel.
Yeah, no, it feels like those 3 years was just kind of a holding point, but also in a way that they didn't happen in terms of like touring and stuff. It's like you haven't been over in 5 years, but 3 of those years don't count.
Yeah, exactly. I know, it's kind of like, especially for musicians in general, like, everything just went on hold.
Yeah.
It was like the pause button on our entire lives, So yeah, it's funny. It seems like no time has passed. And at the same time, it feels like, way too much time. Yeah.
No, definitely. And with kind of, obviously you wrote your solo album that last came out in 2020. I think your last Devil Makes Three album was 2018.
Yeah.
Is there new music that you're working on for kind of both projects at the moment?
Yeah, there definitely is. Yeah, there is. And like I said, throughout the whole thing with COVID, it was really difficult for us to get together and play.
Yeah.
So we do have material for both, but we haven't had that much time to get together. And luckily that's possible now. A lot of bands during that time period were doing a lot of, stuff online where they were sending tracks or kind of continuing to work. But honestly, we can't do that. We're just not that kind of band. It's like we need to be in the same room, I think, in order to figure out our parts and write our harmonies and do all of that. So yeah, we definitely have material, and I have material for another solo record as well. And it's just kind of a matter of banging it out. One of the things that I like to do is to go on tour and play new material.
Yeah.
For me, it's like a way to see what's working.
Yeah.
I really kind of rely on playing something to an audience and seeing what the reaction is, seeing how it feels to play it with the band or to play it by myself. And, sometimes you were like, well, that one is not going to make it. And other times, the reaction's really good. So that's kind of what I'm planning on doing in the future, is taking out new material and playing it live.
No, definitely. I think you definitely have to road test stuff, but it's also, you just get more comfortable in the song before you get to record it. You know when you're going to emphasize a word or have a certain
Hmm.
inflection on a phrase, or when to pause. And it just, to road test the song is just an invaluable thing. Even to go back to open mics, to trial them out there is like something that really, really helps.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. And like I said too, I really think it's like trial by fire. You know
Mm.
what I mean? That's the truth, I think, for me, and I've always done that. And it's part of the reasons why it takes us a long time to put out records, both me by myself and the band too, is that I don't like to go in the studio and just do a tune without having that road testing
Yeah.
take place. It's like a really important part of the process for me. So
Mm.
yeah, I mean, hopefully I'll get to do that. I mean, the band has some gigs coming up. We got the European tour coming up. I have a solo tour and then some dates in the United States. And I'm hoping that if I can pull it off, I'll go to the West Coast in the fall.
Mm.
The band is going to do some festivals out there, but also fingers crossed might go do some shows with the Bridge City Sinners
Oh, awesome.
if it works out. So we'll
Mm.
see.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And with kind of, you've said the band's kind of like all over the country at the moment. When did
Hmm.
kind of everyone move into the different places, or have they always been in these different places?
No, we all used to live in California.
Yeah.
From the beginning of the band for like the 10 years following, like 2012 maybe, we were all generally in the same area.
Mm.
But then after that, I moved back to the East Coast. Lucia moved back to the East Coast. We Cooper moved to Austin, Texas.
Mm.
And then we added some members to the band. We have a fiddle player down in Nashville, a drummer who lives here locally in New England.
Mm.
So we kind of expanded the lineup a bit too,
Yeah.
and that made it a little more complicated to get everybody together. But for the first like 10 years of the band's life, we were in California and we were in Santa Cruz together.
Mm.
We split up a little bit, moved to different places in California, but it was still fairly close together, just a couple hours apart.
Mm.
But after a while, yeah, I think everybody, life takes you in different directions.
Yeah.
Some of us wanted to be back. I'm from New England. Lucia is from New England. Cooper went to Austin, bought a house. Things just changed. People went
Mm.
different places. Um, it just kind of happened naturally. And also at that point, we had started to tour more nationally.
Yeah.
So it mattered a lot less.
Mm.
When we first started out, it was really important. I mean, we like basically lived in the same house, and then after a while, I was like, well, we're going to be touring all over. It doesn't really matter if you live in Texas or you live
Mm.
in Boston or you live in Nashville. We're going to go there eventually. So it became easier.
Mm.
But yeah, now it's definitely a little more complicated.
Mm. Was there any apprehension when you kind of had these conversations about moving and things, that making sure that the band could keep going? Obviously, with the help of kind of the level you're at now, it is national tours, so you're not having to get into a van to win people over. It is, you're booking,
Hmm.
shows and stuff, and people are coming out for it. Was there a conversation about how it would look, or was it kind of, you knew at that position as you moved on it was going to be secure?
Yeah, we knew at that point. I mean, we were spending more time gone than we were at home.
Mm.
And at that point, or at least half the time traveling
Mm.
every year. And at that point, where you're living is kind of irrelevant.
Yeah.
It's like it's just a place that you go for the 6 months that you're not traveling. And those 6 months were never back to back, so
Mm.
it would be off and on. We'd go back and forth and back and forth. And at that point, it just seemed, yeah. I mean, I think all of us knew that we were going to be traveling a lot, and that wherever we called home was kind of just where we spent half of the year.
Mm.
And yeah, of course, that changed when we all went home full time. Then it was like, wow, we live a long way apart. This is difficult. But before that, we were meeting up so much for touring.
Yeah.
It really didn't matter
Mm.
as long as there was an airport nearby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, awesome. Well, I don't want to take up any more of your time, but I really appreciate you sitting down and chatting to us. And I really, can't wait for you to hit Europe for this tour. I know it's going to be killer with Clyde. And then hopefully I get to see you in May as well when you come to the UK, up my neck of the woods.
Yeah, thanks so much. This was great. And
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to the tour, and definitely looking forward to the tour of the band as well.
Yeah.
So hopefully we'll get over to see you
Yeah.
next time, if not solo, then with the band.
No, awesome. Well, I can't wait for the Manchester date in May.
Cool.
And there we have it, folks. That was Pete Bernhard of The Devil Makes 3. Make sure you see him in Europe when you can across March and April. And he is coming to the UK with The Devil Makes 3 in May. He's hitting Manchester, Nottingham, London, and Bristol. So make sure you can see him when you can. Also, don't forget to check out Mike and the Moonpies. And make sure you come see me and Luke Hendrickson when we are around in April. Until then, keep supporting the things you love. Keep doing the things you love. Peace.